really is a terribly sad day for everyone involved in the broadcasting industry. Media personality Mark Pilgrim has sadly died at the age of 53, losing his battle with cancer this morning. A very long fight for Mark. He was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer in February of last year. Yesterday, his employer, Hot 1027 FM, said Pilgrim was taking a break from social media to focus on getting better. Well, it's a pleasure to have Managing Director Lloyd Madurai of Hot 1027 with us this afternoon. Lloyd, good afternoon. Thank you for your time. And I can't imagine the devastation, not just for Mark's family, but also for his fans and also the family of Hot 1027. How are you all doing?
Thank you, Gareth. It's been an incredibly difficult time here at Hot. We put out a statement on Friday as requested by the family. I was asked yesterday by Adrian, Mark's fiance, to come through to their home as Mark had taken a turn for the worse. So it's incredibly difficult for us here at Hot 1027. Mark's last radio show with us was at the end of October, and he was in an incredible amount of pain. He coughed a lot before he did a link, and being the true professional that Mark Pilgrim is and always will be, is that if you heard that radio show, nobody would have known that Mark was in pain.
I remember many years ago, before Mark joined your station, Hot 1027, my memories of Mark was 5FM, and there's very few, and tell me if you agree, Lloyd, you've been around for a long time, there's very few presenters in broadcasting where you will tune in because it is that presenter. And I remember when Mark was on 5FM, I would tune in only because it was Mark Pilgrim as well. It was the voice of a generation, wasn't it?
It was. He was your true 80s guy. He loved his 80s music. That was our Mark. It was one of the reasons why he joined Hot 1027. And he had said, well, you know what, I'm hanging up my headphones from another radio station, but I've heard about this one, and I'd love to be a part of it because it's who I am. Mark was a true professional, just humble, gentle. He was always giving. What I love about Mark is that he always wanted to help. He always had a smile on his face. It was laughter. He made fun of himself, and he loved it. You could hear it. It wasn't a job for Mark. This is what he always wanted to do.
I saw photos of tributes. I see it's trending #1 in the country. Not that I watch social media too closely, of course, but hashtag rest in peace Mark Pilgrim trending #1. I couldn't believe when I saw photos of Mark with hair. I think that's what took me back a couple of years ago. I was like, is that Mark? Doesn't even look like Mark. Your memory of him, though, when was the first time that you met him, Lloyd? Because I know you've been around for a very long time. You've worked with some of the top talent our country's ever produced. Do you have one memory for me?
Mark was affectionately known as Baldy in the industry. And I joined, in fact, the first time I worked with Mark was at Highveld many, many years ago. And I was thrilled to meet him for the very first time. Once again, just kind, humble. He was this guy at this point who was doing Big Brother. And he did seasons 1 and 2 of Big Brother. And everybody wanted to be around Mark. And I would have expected this ego-driven personality to walk into my office. But it was just this fun guy, the same guy who was on the radio is the guy who was in my office. He was lovely to be around. He loved what he did. Mark was always the guy here at Hot 1027 laughing. He had a kind word to say about everybody. I cannot think of a single time I was at Mark where he's had anything negative to say about anybody. Mark lived by a quote from Benjamin Franklin. And he said, some people die at 25 but aren't buried until 75. And this gave Mark the courage not to continue a career with accounting, but he decided, I want to be in radio. And Mark gave up his time in our radio academy to teach young people about radio and the passion for it. They don't make them like Mark anymore.
No, they don't. Not at all. I think that what always stood out for me, and this is not from having known Mark personally, you and I spoke via WhatsApp a few hours ago, and this is why I'm so glad you've made time for me. I never got an opportunity or a pleasure to meet Mark, but I managed to get his number, and him and I would exchange WhatsApps. But I never, from anyone I've spoken to, ever got the sense that Mark Pilgrim, and tell me if you agree, Lloyd, he was one of those talents, he was one of those personalities, one of those generational legends that didn't even know how good he was. He didn't know how good he was at what he did. It came out of him naturally, didn't it?
I couldn't agree with you more. Mark is and will always be such a talent. To him, it was doing what he loved. If Mark had to leave a legacy, it's genuinely about caring. Mark wasn't fake. There was positivity, and I just, I can't think of Hot 1027 without Mark. Mark hadn't been on air since I think it was around about October, and we've kept the show open for Mark, and it'll always be somebody standing in for Mark Pilgrim. Our listeners on a daily basis want to find out how is Mark doing, and he kept communicating with them until a point when he just couldn't anymore. And yesterday, when we were with him, sat in the room with him, with Adrian, and a few words came out, and he had the radio playing in the background, and I said, I want to give you a hug, and he made a noise and said yes, and he hugs, and a little smile on his face, and this was our Mark. Mark will always be a part of our family.
If I'm not mistaken, Lloyd, I hope I'm not stepping out of line here, but I seem to recall seeing a social media post. I think it might have been Mark on social media. At one point, wasn't he broadcasting from his hospital bed, or he was doing a few links from the hospital bed, wasn't he? Or have I got that completely wrong?
He did do a few links, and when Mark was in hospital, he was getting bored, and he said, all right, guys, I'm listening to the radio station every day. In fact, we got tired of Mark calling us saying, I didn't like this on air. Can you guys please change it? And we'd go, yeah, sure, we'll change that for you. Mark knew every song the radio station played. He knew everything about the radio station. He eventually asked, can we do a couple of links? And we said, sure. And we said, even Mark, when you come out of hospital, you continue the show from your home. And we made preparations for all of that, because as far as Mark was concerned, his biggest desire was to be back behind the microphone at Hot.
And I think just before I start saying goodbye to you, Lloyd, he had an undoubted commitment to broadcasting and sharing his love and sharing his voice with everyone as well. I think you're one of the few broadcasters that would actually keep someone on. You and I know this is a very, very tough industry, and it can be very easy to say goodbye to people who may no longer, and I don't mean this to be crass, you've been around. If you're no longer serving a purpose, it's very easy to move on, and I want to commend you for, as a radio station and management, for keeping him on in this as well. But I can't help but then look back at Mark, how open he was with his illness. I would have imagined, maybe if I was in his position, I would have just vanished. It was a private moment. He was battling cancer for a number of years, yet he made it so public. And I've done a number of interviews about cancer and cancer awareness because of what Mark has done on social media. And that's the kind of impact. Apart from radio, his fight and his voice about cancer is going to carry on for generations.
Yes, it will. Mark was a true inspiration to everybody. He was courageous. In fact, Mark was first diagnosed with cancer when Mark was in his late teens, and it was testicular cancer at that point. And here around Hot, Mark would always make fun about his, I don't want to be crass on TV, but his one testicle, and he would go on about the baldy and the one testicle, and he made everybody laugh. And that's who Mark was. It's the laughter that is going to be so difficult for us to come to terms with, that Mark is no longer.
I always remember him, I think it was, as you say, in the early teens. He used to always talk about being slightly off balance. Again, if we're not trying to be too crass for television, he was slightly off balance. I don't know why I remember that particular comment as well. And just for those who might not have known, as I say goodbye to you, Lloyd, I know you're about to head off to the family home, and that must be very difficult for you, and I'm sure many people appreciate it. One memory, not one memory, we've spoken about that, but there's many youngsters now maybe watching this who are outside of the Hot 1027 FM frequency. I know you've expanded, but might not know the Mark of old, the Mark of 5FM, the Mark Pilgrim of 94.7 when I used to listen to it back in the day as well. How do you describe Mark Pilgrim to this new generation, knowing the legend that he was? Old school, brought in very seamlessly with new school. How do you describe him to someone younger?
Mark described as somebody who loved unconditionally, somebody who loved what he did. Mark loved the music he played. He loved the people around him. He loved his audience. He wasn't fake. He didn't care what was happening on social media. He loved what he did. And that's one of the reasons why Mark trained people through the Radio Academy. He didn't get paid for that. He just wanted to make a difference, and Mark was there to make a difference. He was that professional. He was humble. He was gentle. He was giving, and I wish that new talent coming out today can take a page out of Mark Pilgrim's book on this is what radio is about, and it's a relationship with your best friend. And Mark knew that every day. That when he was behind that microphone, he was talking to one person. He loved his audience. He truly loved people who listened to him, and he took time to correspond with them as well.
Yeah, what I always remember is his ability to create the theatre of the mind. It's what we're all taught in our early years of broadcasting. Lloyd, thank you very much. Condolences to you, the Hot 1027 FM family, his friends, his loved ones, and of course his family. Lloyd, I know you're going there later to go and give your support to the Pilgrim family, to his, I believe it's his fiancée and his children. So all the best to you, and we'll never be able to replace a voice and a character like Mark, but I thank you for coming on. Lloyd Madurai, Hot 1027 FM, Managing Director. Such terribly sad news. One of the saddest pieces of news we've had since the passing of Jeremy Mansfield as well at Hot 1027. Our condolences from the entire broadcasting fraternity to Mark Pilgrim and his loved ones.